right, welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today we're diving into something that's pretty much unavoidable these days, especially if you're a teenager or, well, let's be honest, pretty much anybody, social media. But
Yeah.
specifically, its impact on mental health.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? Something like 95% of teenagers aged 13 to 17 are online. That's a huge number.
It is, and that's why we want to really understand the good and the bad,
Yeah.
because there's definitely both sides to this. So we've gone through a ton of research, talked to experts, really try to get the full picture.
Yeah, and it's complex, right?
Yeah.
But let's start with the obvious, right? Social media is about connection. It lets people connect across huge distances,
Right.
share interests, find people like them, and that can be huge, especially for people who feel isolated.
Yeah.
Maybe they live in a remote area or have anxiety about in-person stuff, or maybe they're part of a group that's not always accepted everywhere. These online spaces can be a lifeline.
You're so right. And there's a survey back in 2022 that actually asked teens how they felt about social media. And a lot of them, like 58%, said they felt more accepted.
Wow.
67% more supported, 71% even more creative, and 80% felt more connected to their friends. So it's not all doom and gloom, right?
Exactly.
But how does that actually work? Like, how does that support and acceptance actually play out in these online communities? So what's really interesting is how these very specific online communities form around shared experiences, right? So like, let's say someone's dealing with anxiety, they can find an online group dedicated to that where they can actually share how they're feeling, maybe anonymously, and get advice from others who really get it. They can even get tips for coping mechanisms. That kind of access, the ability to connect with people who understand, that's something that can be really hard to find in person sometimes. And on top of that, we're seeing social media used as a tool for sharing information about mental health resources. So it's not just pure support, it's also about increasing awareness and access to professional help.
Yeah, that's a good point. It's almost like a directory or a guide in a way.
Right.
Yeah, that's really important. And it's definitely become this platform for especially young people to really explore who they are, like their identity. You see it a lot with LGBTQ plus youth or girls of color. They can find content that makes them feel seen and heard, and that can be really powerful, especially if they're not getting that same level of acceptance offline. Totally. And it's not just about finding people like you, right? It's also about finding information and resources that resonate with your experiences, with your identity. That kind of validation can be really hard to come by in certain environments. But it's important to remember that social media is not all sunshine and rainbows. We have to talk about the downsides, and the big one, the one that always comes up, is cyberbullying.
Oh, absolutely. And the online harassment, it's just relentless sometimes. And it can have devastating effects on people's self-esteem, especially for young people.
Yeah.
There are studies that show that a significant percentage of people using the internet have experienced some form of harassment online. And the more you use social media, the more likely you are to encounter it.
Oh, sure.
And the really scary part is the link between cyberbullying, specifically on social media, and depression in kids and teenagers. And it seems like teenage girls and LGBTQ plus youth are particularly vulnerable, which just adds another layer of complexity and concern.
Yeah. And one thing that really contributes to this is how people present themselves online, right? Social media has become this highlight reel. It's all about showing the best, most perfect version of yourself.
Right, the filtered, edited version.
Exactly. And the problem is that it creates these unrealistic expectations. People start comparing themselves to these curated versions of other people's lives. And it can be really damaging, especially when it comes to body image. There was this internal research that came out from Facebook a while back.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
It showed that Instagram actually worsened body image issues for a significant percentage of teenage girls.
It's crazy to think about that.
And it's not just Instagram, it's across platforms. A large percentage of teens report feeling worse about their bodies because of social media in general. And it's not just the content itself, right? It's also how these platforms are designed. They're designed to keep you engaged, to keep you scrolling, to keep you coming back for more.
It's like they're engineered to be addictive. It's that fear of missing out, that constant need to check to see what everyone else is doing. And it's all driven by these algorithms that are designed to give you that little dopamine hit every time you get a notification, a like, a comment. And the more time you spend online, the less time you're spending on other things, healthier things, like connecting with people face to face, being active, pursuing hobbies. There are studies showing that teens who spend over 3 hours a day on social media are twice as likely to experience negative mental health outcomes.
Yeah.
And some teens are spending way more than 3 hours a day. They're practically living on platforms like YouTube and TikTok.
It's a lot. And what
Yeah.
gets lost in all of that is the critical thinking, the ability to step back and evaluate the information you're being bombarded with, right?
True.
Because social media can also be a breeding ground for misinformation
Oh, yeah.
and harmful content. Algorithms, while they're intended to show you what's relevant to you, they can also end up amplifying misleading or even dangerous information, including stuff about mental health. And that can have a really negative impact on people's understanding and their ability to seek help.
And the thing is, we're seeing more and more adolescent mental health issues. It's becoming a real crisis.
Yeah.
And social media's role in all of this is being scrutinized more than ever. There's a lot of research now linking social networking site use to higher risks of depression, anxiety, psychological distress. There was this one study that tracked young teens over time.
Uh-huh.
And the ones who were on social media for more than 3 hours a day were twice as likely to report poor mental health. And then you look at the teens who are using social media the most, like around 5 hours a day. 41% of them rate their mental health as poor or very poor, compared to only 23% of teens who use social media less.
That's a big difference.
It is. And it's no wonder that we're seeing things like New York City taking legal action against these big social media companies. It's clear that there's a growing concern about the impact this is all having.
Absolutely. And what's encouraging is that experts are starting to speak out more and more about this. Like Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, he came out and said point blank that there's growing evidence that social media is causing harm to young people's mental health.
That's a pretty strong statement.
It is. And there are experts at Yale who are advising parents to really think about filtering what their kids are exposed to online, even delaying when they get full access to smartphones. Claude Mellons, he's a researcher who's been studying this for a while, he talks about how social media can be this platform for bullying and exclusion, how it sets these unrealistic expectations, particularly around body image, and how that can be really detrimental to mental health, especially for girls and LGBTQ plus youth. And then you have someone like Deborah Glassifer, who's an expert on eating disorders, and she talks about how platforms that are so focused on appearance can be particularly challenging for people who are susceptible to those kinds of issues because it's just this constant stream of comparisons.
So what can we actually do about it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's clear that we need to be proactive. We need to take steps to protect our mental health in this digital age. Setting time limits seems like a no-brainer. And being mindful of the content we're consuming. Curating our feeds, unfollowing accounts that make us feel bad, seeking out content that's positive and uplifting.
Absolutely. And prioritizing real-life connections.
Yeah.
Spending time with people face-to-face, engaging in activities that make us feel good, that don't involve a screen. Because it's so easy to forget that what we see online is often just a carefully constructed version of reality. It's not the whole picture.
Yeah, and sometimes you just need a break, like a full-on social media detox. Just disconnect for a while and reconnect with yourself, with the world around you.
I think that's great advice for everyone.
Yeah.
And for parents, it's really important to have open and honest conversations with their kids about social media.
Absolutely.
Set clear boundaries, maybe have some rules about screen time, and make sure devices aren't allowed in bedrooms so kids can actually get a good night's sleep.
It's interesting. This whole conversation has really highlighted how complex this issue is. Social media has the power to connect us, to support us, to help us find our tribe.
Yeah.
But it also has the potential to harm us, to make us feel inadequate, to expose us to negativity and misinformation. It's like this double-edged sword.
It really is. And that's why it's so important to be mindful of how we use it, to be proactive about protecting our mental health, to remember that we have control over how we engage with these platforms.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to leave you with a question to think about. How can we as individuals and as a society better integrate these powerful tools, these technologies into our lives without compromising our mental well-being?
And what role do the platforms themselves have in creating a healthier, more supportive digital environment? That's something we all need to consider.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.
See you on the next deep dive.